So are 120 round per minute hand cannons too hot? Well, at least from Bungie's perspective, they are. Despite receiving pretty substantial range nerfs at the beginning of the season, 120s are arguably still the best weapons in the game. And this is one of those weapons where time to kill doesn't really equate to how lethal a weapon type can be. 120s actually sit at a 1 second TTK value, which doesn't sound that desirable, but it's the sheer amount of damage that you can do with every crit and every body shot that allows it to be the most forgiving archetype in the game. Now, pulled from the sandbox patch notes at the beginning of Season of the Splicer, there was actually like 2 nerfs that targeted 120 round per minute hand cannons. One of them directly, the other one indirectly. The first one is of course the range nerf, where they stated that aggressive 120s now have damage and aim assist fall off distance reduced by between 2 and 4 meters based on the range stat. Now, when we actually sit down and looked at range post and pre-nerf, at least from our testing, it was even more substantial. Pre-Splicer, you can actually reach up to 47 meters with a 120 round per minute hand cannon and rangefinder. Now, post-Splicer, that dropped it down to 41 meters. And just testing just high range 120s without rangefinder, they were hitting around 46 meters with max range, no rangefinder, now dropped down to 39.5. Now, the indirect nerf was actually targeted at quick draw, which was kind of a sweeping nerf to a lot of weapons with quick draw. But take Igneous, for instance. One of the strongest perks on this weapon pre-season the Splicer was quick draw. This is an aggressive frame hand cannon. It's slow, it's sluggish. Quick draw allows it to completely bypass that. But since the nerfs to quick draw, you've seen its usage on a lot of weapons really dip off, but especially on primaries. Now back to 120s being too hot. On paper, this is a very big range nerf, and realistically it needed to happen because 120s were invading too many spaces. They were invading scout rifle territory, pulse rifle territory. In comparison to 140 round per minute hand cannons, even max range ones like Ace of Spades, it still had way more range by a huge margin. Like when you take Palindrome with max range, with rangefinder, you could potentially reach 36.5, maybe 37 meters. That's everything loaded out in range, which by the way, isn't necessarily the wisest thing to do now since stability has become more and more important on a lot of weapons, but especially hand cannons, even for mouse and keyboard users. However, despite the range nerf, you still see a huge dominance of 120s. Honestly, it makes me wonder what this conversation would be had 120s just remained 110s. Again, originally, True Prophecy and all these aggressive hand cannons shot at 110 rounds per minute. Bungie really wanted to open up with Beyond Light and make these hand cannons worth something. Personally, I think they went too hard because they did 2 things. Number 1, they converted 150s to 140s, and simultaneously they converted 110s to 120s and gave them scout rifle range. And even 150s, take Wake and Vigil for instance, even with a rangefinder roll, you're lucky if you hit 32, 33 meters. And that would be the case even if it was still a 150. But I think a lot of people liked 150 round per minute hand cannons simply because it was very quick. It was a great dueling weapon. It still required 3 crits in order to take advantage of its time to kill value of 0.8 seconds. But this was a knee-jerk reaction in my opinion, or at least it appears to be overly weighted towards making 120s meta. You see, had they just like done one or the other, like kept 120s, 110s, gave them the range bump, which is still too substantial, but let's just say they gave them the range bump, but still kept 150s in the game, I think the conversation would be different today. Regardless, a lot of the debate when talking about hand cannons, a lot of people will bring up, well, just make other hand cannon archetypes more forgiving. Make 140s more forgiving. Make them a 2 crit 1 body, which I'm not exactly disagreeing with, but I do want to bring up something that was brought up in that podcast, and it's about hand cannons themselves. Hand cannons, at 0 aim assist, its accuracy cone sits at 2.5 degrees. And at 100, it ramps up to 3 degrees. Now, pulling these values out, the cone is fat, both its aim assist cone and its accuracy cone. As a point of reference, when looking at sniper rifles, at 0 aim assist, they're 0.825. And at 100 aim assist, they're 1.375. Now, of course, that gets bumped with zoom, but the point I'm trying to make is that hand cannons in its target acquisition is very, very forgiving. So not only do you have 120s, which can hit in scout rifle territory, even now at 40 meters, definitely invading all pulse rifles, but simultaneously you have one of the most forgiving weapons, only requiring 1 crit to body on 5 resilience guardians or less. But I'm going to take this a step further, and the reason why hand cannons are meta, and I see it brought up all the time, and I'm by no means asking for hand cannons and how they fundamentally work to get a nerf, but I do want to acknowledge why so many other primary weapons lag behind, especially things like scout rifles. Notice what I'm doing right here. All I'm doing is just sprinting. Like, I'm just coming in and out of my sprint. But if you see what's happening, my reticle, it's constantly flaring out. You see it on auto rifles, you see it on pulse rifles, and you see it substantially so on scout rifles. Now, that brief period of inaccuracy results in a lot of things. Number one, as you're entering a gunfight, there is a brief moment of inaccuracy before the gunfight even begins where that reticle is having to settle. Now, I believe Bungie is doing this intentionally because they don't want every weapon type in the game to be running and gunning. They want you to stop, aim, and lane. The problem is, if you look at hand cannons, they completely avoid any type of movement penalty. That reticle stays true no matter what. And if you throw on an Icarus mod, it's one of the easiest weapons to land damage while in the air. On top of that, it's a single shot. Maneuvering in air and landing a shot with an auto rifle is much more difficult than maneuvering in the air with a hand cannon. We're talking about having to line up just one single shot, which for 120 could grant you 91 damage versus multiple shots from a pulse rifle or an auto rifle. And if you take scout rifles, unless you're rocking like top tree Dawn Blade, good luck trying to land any shots while in air, even with an Icarus mod. There seems to be very like Halo-esque mechanics when it comes to every weapon type inside of Destiny 2. Boots on the ground, stopping, squaring up with your enemy, dueling. But hand cannons completely avoid that, which is why we've continually seen a hand cannon meta. And the only times that we have not seen a hand cannon meta is when Bungie substantially buffs the damage of certain weapon archetypes. Take 600 round per minute auto rifles or even things like Uriel's Gift in year 1, but that is not a good permanent solution. In my opinion, considering how forgiving hand cannons are, considering it plays so well with all the different mobility types inside of Destiny, whatever it may be, it's also the best when it comes to doing instantaneous peak damage. You want to dip in and out of cover? No problem. You're just barely peeking for just a moment and granting yourself full damage. It completely bypasses other weapon types and their requirements to square up and duel. My suggestion, and I don't even know if this is actually a possibility, but just remove all accuracy nerfs or accuracy penalties while moving in the game for all weapons. No, hand cannons won't get stronger because they already avoid it. And 2, you'll now have a bunch of other weapons that still require their enemies to square up, but you won't be penalized for taking advantage of something inside of Destiny that's so good. And that's the movement. And I know Kevin and Chris both talked about like dialing back movement, getting away from like what top tree Dawn Blade has to offer, but I don't think that's a wise choice. I don't believe going the direction of like a go slow update. We had the go fast update. A go slow update would never work out well for Destiny, as in the community would never like it. Players like the feeling of their movement. They like being able to jump around the map and land shots and do crazy stuff. They like the vertical play for those that do want to take advantage of the vertical play. Personally, at this point, it's time to just go ahead and allow all weapons to partake in this. Currently right now, I think hand cannons and sidearms and I believe submachine guns, neither one of them seem to have any type of movement penalty. The difference between submachine guns and sidearms is that hand cannons, at least for 120s, can touch scout rifle range. Again, there's a lot of debates on map design and whether or not map design would change things. I get it. I want bigger maps. I would love to use scout rifles, other weapon types in the game, but I'm telling you guys, if you want a more diverse playing field amongst all your different archetypes, whatever cone it is, whether it's the aim assist cone, the accuracy cone, I don't know. Whatever that is that's being penalized when moving with certain weapon types needs to stop. And I know this is like a difficult thing for Bungie because other game developers run into this. Hell, Valorant, for instance, here recently stated that they significantly increased the amount of error that all rifles get when moving and shooting to help combat the sensation of running kills with rifles. But understand, the way Valorant plays and the way Destiny plays, I get why Valorant did that. Valorant is more tactical and way more slower paced than Destiny 2. Destiny 2's strengths is in its movement. That's very much incorporated into its skill gap. I think the only way you're going to really dial in 120s, and all hand cannons for that matter, is to no longer penalize other archetypes simply for trying to move fast. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.